would discuss diversity and social change. This is topic 3.2. This happens to be on page number 90 from our Cambridge endorsed book. Now, this topic family diversity is pretty important when it comes to the CIs. And before we proceed, let me remind you, like I mentioned, family diversity is what we get our questions on. I mean, this is a popular topic in terms of our CIs, but for now, we talk about the causes and consequences. The causes, number one, number two, the consequences of changing patterns of marriage. Now, we have statistical support for this. There has been a dramatic change in the amount of marriages, and if you ask a layman would probably say, "Oh, people are getting married less today." Okay, but there are numerous other factors that I'd like to bring into your attention before. I mean, that would make the way you think different from how a layman thinks, right? A sociology student versus a layman, a common man. Okay, ji. So we talk about how patterns of marriages have changed, how patterns of cohabitation have changed, how divorce patterns have changed, how separation has changed. And mind it, divorce is different from separation. Separation is when a couple is still married and they do not live together. However, when you talk about divorce, divorce is the legal termination of marriage, right? Divorce is the legal termination of marriage. Us in Pakistan, we keep on using these terms interchangeably. We should not. Divorce is the legal termination of marriage, an irretrievable breakdown of marriage when marriage has broken down legally, right? And when you talk about separation, separation, like I said, is when a couple is still legally married but they do not live together. Okay, now moving on with the causes and consequences of the changing patterns of marriage. First, we talk about the UK over here because we usually do one. And in this case, we talk about UK over here with the assumption that there are similar patterns found in other Western developed countries, and the cause and consequences would probably be the same. To start off with, as we speak about marriage, before we proceed, I'd want everyone to write down this question. The question is, evaluate the claim that marriage as an institution is experiencing a decline in modern industrial societies. Evaluate the claim that marriage as an institution is experiencing a decline in modern industrial societies. 26 marks. Write down this question and then we proceed. Like I said, the general understanding or the general perception people hold about the patterns of marriages, that marriage as an institution is experiencing a decline, and we have statistical support for this as well. But let me ask you a couple of questions before we even proceed with this. If we say there has been a reduction in the amount of marriages today, have we taken into consideration the marriageable cohort? Number one, I need to remind you all what the word cohort means. We use the term cohort to refer to the experiences an individual has on the basis of the generation they belong to. To put it in a simplistic manner, if I talk about my generation, we did not grow up with YouTube. The generation today, we see them using YouTube. I think majority of the kids from the middle or the upper class background do end up using YouTube at least once in a day. Now, this was just a very simple example to explain you what cohort is. Okay? So when you talk about, and the term that I'd used was a marriageable cohort. You know what? If you talk about demographic trends, if you talk about demography, our life expectancy in our part of the world is different from the life expectancy people have in the Western world, especially UK. In Pakistan, we have a lower life expectancy as compared to the people in the UK. Over here, you'd see people dying younger at a younger age. You know what? When we talk about a decline in marriage, don't you think there have to be enough of people in the marriageable cohort for them to marry? If there's a population, like if I talk about the population, the UK, they have a lot of elderly people, and fewer people from the marriageable cohort or fewer younger people. In contrast, if we talk about our country, if we talk about developing countries, South Asian countries, you see the other way around, right? We have fewer people who live for very long, and on the other hand, we have a lot of people from the younger lot. And this is an explanation that is used by many people when they talk about COVID, this novel COVID 19 not affecting our part of the world much. Because we have more of younger population, less of elderly people, and because of which this is just another factor out of many that has resulted in a difference in terms of deaths due to COVID in our part of the world compared to the West. Likewise, अगर आपके पास मैरिजेबल पॉपुलेशन में इतने लोग नहीं होंगे तो कम लोग मैरी करेंगे, राइट? सबसे पहली चीज़। नंबर टू, अगर आप कहते हैं कि मैरिज एज एन इंस्टीट्यूशन की सिग्निफिकेंस कम हो रही है, एंड अ टिपिकल एक्सप्लेनेशन दैट पीपल प्रोवाइड फॉर दिस इज द डिवोर्स रेट, अ राइज इन द डिवोर्स रेट। एक लोग कहते हैं मैरी लोग कम करें, दूसरा लोग कहते हैं कि डिवोर्सेस बढ़ रही हैं। ओके फाइन, एक्सेप्टेड। If there's been a rise in the divorce rate, have we wondered why? There's a possibility that this rise of divorce rate could be because of the changes in the legal system, because of the changes in the laws that were there that people had to adhere to when it come to obtaining divorce. This is something we discuss in detail later on as we move on to the next topic that would have to do with divorce. But for now, if we stick to marriage simply over here, I don't know if you have heard of baby boom. बेबी बूम के बारे में अगर आपने नहीं सुना तो आपके पास एक रैपिड राइज आया था, अगर आप हिस्ट्री उठा के देखते हैं, इन टर्म्स ऑफ द नंबर ऑफ बर्थ्स दैट वर गिवन, राइट? एंड बिकॉज ऑफ विच, इन बर्थ्स की वजह से देखें आपके पास अगर पॉपुलेशन के अंदर एक रैपिड राइज आ जाता है इन टर्म्स ऑफ देयर बीइंग बर्थ्स, डोंट यू थिंक 20 years डाउन द लेन वही आपके पास लोग दे टर्न इनटू the marriageable, they'd enter the marriageable cohort, and that would result in more of marriages. So the point that I'm trying to make over here is, instead of relying simply on layman explanations or layman statements about there being a decrease in the rate of marriages, let's have a look at the complexities, right? Uh, let's have a look at this through a broader horizon. Let's spread out our horizons and see how, I mean, what could possibly be the reasons behind all of this, right? So we're discussing all of this under the heading of patterns of marriages, the changes in the patterns of marriages, the causes behind them, and the consequences behind them, right? To start off with marriage, in modern industrial societies, the number of marriages and the marriage rate has been falling. This is partly because people tend to marry at a later age. There you go. Again, there's a possibility that people probably are not saying no to marriage, but they're just choosing to marry at a later age. So if people are marrying at a later age, हमारे ये कहना गलत होगा कि marriage as an institution is experiencing a decline or the marriage rate is falling, right? They're just choosing to marry at a later age, right? Reducing the number of marriages in a given year, and also because more people choose not to marry at all. That's another explanation, right? When we talk about more people choosing not to marry at all, because people have found alternatives today, there are so many people who end up cohabiting today. For this, we need to know what cohabitation is. Cohabitation is when a couple lives together without being married. Of course, it is not something that's approved of or acceptable in our part of the world, but there are so many parts in the Western world where it is approved, where it is socially accepted. There are so many pregnancies outside marriage that are given legal and social recognition and acceptance, right? So this is partly because people tend to marry at a later age, reducing the number of marriages in a given year. Also, because more people choose not to marry at all, right? This could be linked with social acceptance, a social change. Although there has been a consistent overall decline in marriages and a steady decline in first marriages in the UK, this has been balanced to some extent by remarriages. This is, I believe I did mention this a couple of minutes back, right? For the people who claim there have been a lot of divorces, fine. If there have been a lot of divorces, at the same time there has been such a dramatic increase in remarriage rate too. And if people are remarrying after getting divorced, don't you think that forces us to believe that they're probably not against the institution of marriage? They're just simply sick and tired of the partners. They are not happy with the partners and they're looking for a change. Looking for a change from one partner to another is one thing, and marriage as an institution experiencing an overall decline is another, right? Had people been against the institution of marriage, they wouldn't have remarried. And I think that makes sense. Remarriages peaked in the 1980s and have since slowly declined. But as the percentage of all marriages, remarriages have doubled in the past 50 years, reaching its highest point, peaking around the turn of the 21st century and slowly declining over the past 10 years. There's been an increase in serial monogamy. To remind you all what serial monogamy is, remember, monogamous marriage or monogamy is when a person lives with the same partner throughout their life. However, when we talk about serial monogamy has to do with a person being married to a single partner at a time, but having or experiencing different marriages throughout their life, right? When you're married to one partner, that partner dies, you marry another, right? Or you divorce your partner, you marry another, right? That's an example of serial monogamy, right? There's been an increase in serial monogamy when a person has several marriage partners over the lifetime, but only one at a time. This sometimes happened in the past because of the death of a partner, but today divorce has been the main cause, right? So what we're talking about over here is कि serial monogamy आज है तो serial monogamy हमारे पास पहले भी थी, but पहले उसके पीछे एक major reason होती थी, the death of a partner. However, today, with the pass of time, things have changed, and today, divorce has been seen as a main cause behind serial monogamy, right? As we take this further and talk about the causes of marital breakdown, the explanations for marital changes fall into two broad groups. Number one, the first suggests that general decline can be explained by population or demographic changes. This is something that I was talking about when we started this discussion and when we spoke about uh, yeah, when I was giving you an overview of what we're doing today. These demographic change, like I had mentioned, these demographic change should be taken into account when you're discussing changes in the pattern of marriages, right? Demographic change क्या होता है? आपके population के characteristics, कितने आपके पास मेल ज़्यादा हैं, किस एज के लोग ज़्यादा हैं, कितने फीमेल ज़्यादा हैं, right? So the first suggests that general decline can be explained by population demographic changes rather than a change in people's behavior. Marriage in the UK was most popular just after the Second World War and during the 1970s. During these periods, there was a baby boom when a greater number of babies were born over a relatively short time, right? A baby boom where a greater
Yes, sir.
number of babies were born over a relatively short time. The Second World War had prevented many couples starting a family, and by the 1950, the average age the average age for family completion from first to last child was historically short, 10 years. This produced a population growth, a rapid if temporary increase in the number of children. This goes some way to explain both an increase in marriage and childbirth during the 1950s and the numbers marrying in the 1970s. See, like I said, आपके पास अगर 1950s के अंदर ज़्यादा बच्चे पैदा हो रहे हैं तो वो population का cohort जब आपका बड़ा बड़ा होगा, when they grow up, as they enter, what do you call it, as they enter their marriageable cohort, there would be more of marriages. So the baby boom generation actually reached adulthood, and that is when there were more marriages seen. Now, a relatable explanation is that in any society, some age or group cohorts are more likely than others to marry. This means there are peak periods of marriages, the age range at which marriage is more likely. The more people there are in the age range, the more marriages there are likely to be. Marriageable population, like I was saying, the number of children or elderly in a population affects marriage statistics as well, right? We have more marriages over here, fine. Our religion plays a part, our culture plays a part, our belief system, values, they all play a part. However, we cannot just ignore the fact that there are more of people from the marriageable population in our countries. right? So the more people there are in this age range, the more marriages there are likely to be. The number of children or elderly in a population affects marriage statistics as well. The UK, in common with many industrial societies, has an aging population, and where you have an aging population, of course आपके पास marriage rate. I know there's no restriction of at which you could get married, of course, मतलब unless you're too young, right? आपके पास कोई restriction नहीं है. People marry at 70 years too. But then typically, usually, conventionally, commonly, what we see is there's a particular age bracket where there are more chances of people getting married. अगर आपके पास population में उस age bracket के ज़्यादा लोग हैं तो आपके पास शायद marriage rate ज़्यादा नज़र आएगा. अगर नहीं है तो there's a possibility कि आपको marriage rate कम नज़र आए. Get it? Now, the size of these two cohorts affect marriage statistics. If we focus on those most likely to marry, that is the marriageable population, or this is the term I've been using all along, we find only a relatively small decline in marriage rates over the past 30 years. Do we get this?
Yes, sir.
Now,
Yes, sir.
let's move on and talk about another explanation. The second explanation that focuses on this is the wider social factors or the wider influences on people's behavior. You know what? Especially in our part of the world, let's talk about something that's relatable, something that we hear about. You know, sounds funny when you say it, but don't you think we all have a very predictable lifestyle? I mean, the people in our society, we get born, we after birth, we study, we get a job, we get married, we have children, and we die, right? Marriage is considered to be an integral phase that everyone is expected to go through, especially in our part of the world, in our part of the world, yeah, South Asian countries, countries like Pakistan. If we compare this with the wider world, if we compare this with the West, things are so different. The negative stigmas that were associated to having children outside marriage have reduced in many parts in the Western world. People feel less pressurized to get married in many parts of the Western world. See, again, like I keep on saying, we could bring in cross-cultural comparison over here. We're studying about UK, but we're living in Pakistan, a South Asian country. Yes, you can write that this might be true in many countries, many developed countries, but it doesn't really work everywhere. There are countries where people still are pressurized to get married at a particular age. And there's this ideal age at which individuals are expected to get married. That's what you I'm asking you to write that if you're bringing in cross-cultural comparison. But if I stick back to the UK, there's less of stigma that is attached to pregnancies outside marriage, or cohabitation, or marriages, divorces, and remarriages. Or if you want to bring in religion, yes, there are many people who claim that secularization is taking place. For the ones who do not know what secularization is, a decline in religion, when the society is experiencing a decline in religion. We could also talk about social changes. Women are getting economically independent, they're getting more career oriented, they're financially independent, which results in them being focused towards their career more and not considering marriage to be the only option for themselves. And if not anything else, this does reduce economic pressure on them. For a very long time, women were expected to marry because there should be someone to provide them with financial support. Gone are the days, especially in the West. Things are changing in our part of the world. Yes, there are slow and gradual changes, but then again, since we're studying about the West, since we're studying about UK over here, there's less of economic pressure for women to marry. If there's less of economic pressure on them, that gives them an option to marry at a later age or to choose not to marry at all. In that case, it wouldn't be wrong if we say marriage for many today is more like a lifestyle choice instead of a necessity, instead of something that they have to do. Increased female financial, career, and personal independence means that marriage is now a lifestyle choice, and women are less likely to enter a relationship that limits their ability to work and develop a career. Right? We're talking about the factors that probably have contributed towards a change in marriage patterns. The first one we discussed over here was demography, and the second one we brought in a discussion over here was wide influences from the society. I hope everyone gets this.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Now, the factor that we're bringing in under discussion now is cohabitation. Cohabitation, like I mentioned a couple of minutes back, is when a couple lives together without being married. As we talk about cohabitation, there's no denial to this. There has been a rapid amount of increase in the rate of cohabitation, especially in the Western world. It has slowly and gradually started affecting South Asian countries like India recently. So yeah, people have started considering another explanation. Now, this is something I'm not saying. There are sociological explanations, sociological theories in support of it and against it as well. There are many sociological commentators who claim that people have started considering cohabitation as an alternative to marriage. And when we talk about cohabitation as an alternative to marriage, they claim this has increased in recent years, and many cohabiting couples eventually do marry, and many do not. Uh, when we talk about, let's talk about this one first, and then we talk about this one, right? Now, for the people who claim that marriages, cohabitation is not bringing in a decline to the institution of marriage, or cohabitation is not a threat to marriage as an institution. In their defense, they claim that many couples who cohabit, they are just trying to figure out if things work out between them and their partner. And if things do work out, they end up marrying, right? One of the explanations. The second one over here is, and we have statistical support to it as well. However, on the other hand, there are others who claim that many people who are cohabiting, they choose not to marry because for them getting married is merely getting yourself into into legalities, which again, if you're cohabiting, if things don't work out well between you and your partner, it's easier for you relatively to walk out of that relationship compared to you being married to someone, and there's a lot of legality that is involved in it. So we've discussed this part, we have discussed this explanation briefly as well. We discuss all of this in detail when we'd be doing cohabitation next, right? So according to Self and Zealy, this suggests that falling marriage and rising cohabitation are the result of people choosing to delay marriage until later in life. That would be another factor too. There are people. Why talk about women alone? There are even men. Even if you talk about males, people are getting more career oriented today. And when you're more career oriented, when you want to focus more on your careers, your life partner or marriage is, like I use the word, merely a lifestyle choice for you. In that case, many people choose to cohabit till they settle down, and then by the time they have settled down as per how they wanted to in their own respective careers, with their own respective careers, and they probably by then have found out the right partner for themselves as well. This could be another reason, right? Do we get this?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Now, if we talk about,
Yes, sir.
like I said, secularization, religious beliefs having less influence on the society. You know what? Marriage is considered to be a religious relationship, or marriage does hold. It's not only about Islam, it's about other religions like monotheistic religions like Christianity, and polytheistic religions like Hinduism as well. Marriage is considered to be a sacred institution, right? So एक तरफ से आप कह रहे हो अगर मैरिज सीक्रेट इंस्टीट्यूशन है, पीपल बिकॉज दे रिलीजियस दे चूज टू मैरी. What if religion in itself is experiencing a decline? अगर आपकी सोसाइटी में से रिलीजन की अहमियत ही कम होती जा रही है, अगर आपकी सोसाइटी में से द सिग्निफिकेंस दैट religion held in your society, once if that's experiencing a decline, that again gives them a reason not to stay married or not to get married merely because your religious religion requires you to do so. I think that makes sense, right? Now, secularization has led to changes in the meaning and significance of marriage. There's less pressure to marry, and the importance of the institution of marriage has declined. Now, like I say, this is just another explanation out of many, right? As much of support we have for this, we have support against this as well. And for the ones who studying A2s, I see a few over here. You do know that the entire idea of secularization taking place or not taking place is again questionable, right? Now, moving on. Finally, Beck in 1992 argued that people in postmodern societies increasingly assess the likely risks and consequences of their actions. Let's pour in a bit of postmodernism over here. Since postmodernists believe we have more of choice today, the more choice we have, the more chances there are that people would like to weigh down the likely risks and consequences of their actions. Since a general perception people hold is that, oh, see, look at the way there are being so many divorces around us, look at the rapid rise in terms of divorce rate. By merely having a look at it, people would want to give it a single giving give it a sing give it a second thought before they plan on getting married, right? They'd like to weigh down, as they say, is the likely risks and consequences of their actions. The likelihood of divorce, with its emotional as well as economic consequences, can lead to the avoidance of risk by not marrying at all. Do we get this? There are
Yes, sir.
consequences and there are economic consequences as well. So yeah, that is
Yes, sir.
it for the day. Take good care of yourself. Stay happy, healthy, safe, and protected. Stay humble. Spread smiles, spread positivity, and Allah Hafiz.